introduce Rudy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. It's my pleasure to introduce Rudy Boutnall. He was born in Italy, graduated from the Faculty of Fine Arts at Toronto's York University, completed executive programs at Stanford and Harvard Business School. Currently, Rudy is president and CEO of British Columbia's Knowledge Network. He was appointed in 2007 and since then has tripled donor revenues. Knowledge Network now is the most funded public broadcaster in Canada since he launched the Endowment Fund. He is responsible for the landmark documentary series, Emergency Room, Life and Death at VGH, and Paramedics, Life on the Line. His international commissions include the Corporation Manufactured Landscapes and the Emmy and Grammy-winning Yo-Yo Ma, inspired by Bach. He is the winner of 9 Academy Awards, an honorary director of letters from Thompson Rivers University, and a member of the Order of Canada. Talks Compelling Conversations is delighted to have this accomplished and decorated broadcaster to speak to us all today. Please virtually welcome Rudy Boutnall.
Okay, and Jane, you can turn off your video and mute yourself, please, and I will do the same. Rudy, go ahead.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, virtually. Thank you, Jean, for the invitation, and thanks to the Kwantlen University Third Age Learning for the invitation. Zoom has its limitations, but in a pandemic, I'm thankful for this opportunity to share some thoughts with you. And before I go on, we've all been on Zoom for almost an entire year, and just as an aside, I've discovered 3 of the most popular Zoom backgrounds, and it's the first one has switched around. It's ceilings and doors. And the second one was bookcases, although now bookcases is most popular. Ceilings and doors is the next one. And the third most popular Zoom background, guitars. So next time you see somebody doing a Zoom session, either on television or personally, just check out for that guitar in the background. I just found it quite unusual. Sometimes it's kind of just squeezed in there. Anyways, as you know, my topic this evening is television. The future isn't what it used to be. In the video streaming era, the more things change, the more they remain the same. The economic divide gets wider, the public space gets smaller, and democracy is threatened in the process. Now, my proposition is this: commercial television has played a leading role in the debasement of public discourse, and public service broadcasting, popularly known as public broadcasting, is a countervailing force. And it does this by supporting and promoting democracy and by providing a wide range of independent perspectives that people trust. Social media also has a huge impact, but I'm going to focus on the role of television this evening. Social and economic inequality is threatening liberal democracies all around the world. In media, streaming and broadband is so expensive that it's creating a digital divide between the digital haves and the digital have-nots. The media environment is polluted by commercial messaging at every single opportunity. And the coarsening of public discourse is overturning democratic conventions. Fake news, conspiracy theories, and the big lies are all becoming normalized. And what happens when in this situation is that trust is lost in the process, trust in commonly accepted facts. It's amazing to me that in this day and age, that the concept of climate change, the scientific fact of climate change, is still a politically contentious issue up for debate. And we can see the role of television in that. Now, one of my favorite authors for understanding the true power of television is now deceased academic author Neil Postman. And he wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Show Business. And I'm going to read a short quote from Neil Postman. Quote, television is our culture's principal mode of knowing itself. Therefore, and this is the critical point, how television stages the world becomes the model for how the world is to be properly staged. It is not merely that on television screen, entertainment is the metaphor for all discourse. It is that off the screen, the same metaphor prevails. As typography once dictated the style of conducting politics, religion, business, education, law, and other important social matters, television now takes command. In courtrooms, classrooms, operating rooms, boardrooms, churches, and even airplanes, Americans no longer talk to each other, they entertain each other. They do not exchange ideas, they exchange images. They do not argue with propositions, they argue with good looks, celebrities, and commercials. Now, Postman wrote this in 1985, and it was the movie era. And his thinking was, who better, if show business is the way you're going to sell the polity on their politics, then who better to portray a president than a movie actor? And America got Ronald Reagan at the time that he wrote the book. Now we're in the reality TV era. So who better to portray a president than a reality TV star? And I'm not even going to mention the former president of the United States, but you know who I'm speaking of. And in this time, television, particularly channels like Fox and CNN, have never been more profitable than this past year. Not by selling news, but by selling opinion. And the more outlandish, more outrageous, the better. And what's happened is that arguments and debates are no longer engaged in good faith. They're just another way to entertain the audience at the pyrotechnics. We now frame everything as good and evil, as right and wrong. We frame the other side as the enemy instead of a loyal opponent. The consequence has been an erosion of trust, civic values, and social cohesiveness. Now, this was predicted by the media philosopher Marshall McLuhan when he coined the phrase global village in the 1960s. Now, back at TV Ontario, I had the opportunity to create several documentaries on the works of Marshall McLuhan and on his works. And one of my colleagues there, Mike McManus, had an evening public affairs program, and he had Marshall McLuhan in the studio for a very extensive interview. And Mike McManus was a man of the cloth. He'd been a Protestant minister, and he had a very optimistic view of things, including global village. And he asked Marshall McLuhan, he said, when the whole globe is connected electronically through television, through electronic media, that'll bring us all together as one harmonious village, won't it? And of course, Marshall McLuhan kind of smirked when he answered. He said, no, he did not have the utopian view. He had the dystopian view. He said that when we all come together as a global village, it will reduce us to tribalism. And tribalism is another word for nationalism. And we can see the rise of nationalism all around the globe, even right here in Canada in many ways. And that's a fearful thing, not what one would think by the advent of global communications. Now, public broadcasting is not the same, not in the same business as commercial broadcasting. Public service broadcasting is the formal name. It was invented 99 years ago by the BBC in the UK with the launch of BBC Radio. It's 99 years and going strong. And it was framed as public service broadcasting, the who, the what, and the how. The who is the public, who we serve. The service is what we provide. And broadcasting, the method for communications, is the only thing we really have in common with commercial broadcasting. One, public broadcasting is freely available to everyone. The other, must be paid for by subscription, by attention to advertising, or by allowing your personal data to be mined and tracked. One educates, the other's missions is to entertain. One speaks to citizen, the other to consumers. One is a trusted source of information, and for the other, well, trust is irrelevant. You know, public broadcasting's editorial independence permits us to take a critical examination of society from very different angles. We're free to challenge conventional wisdom. We're free to offend the powerful and the rich. And I'm going to give you one example in a series of promos that we run here at Knowledge Network. It was a documentary anthology under the title of How to Steal the World. And it was about how globalization, and specifically the financialization of the economy, has increased inequality, and that inequality has fueled the inchoate anger that's threatening liberal democracies, in some ways through the form of nationalism. Now I'm going to do the hardest thing I have to do. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to run that clip and hope I get it right here. Hold on. And here we go.
It is time to reawaken this industrial giant and to lighten our punitive tax burden.
35 years ago, an economic experiment was supposed to improve life for all.
The argument was that if you did these things, we will get rid of unemployment, there'll be more investment, there'll be more income, that will trickle down.
Yet today, the gap between rich and poor has grown.
People at the top of the income ladder have gotten all the income gains that have occurred during the last 30 years. People in the middle of the income distribution, they've run down their savings, they've run up much more debt. Every conceivable margin you can work just to hold your place in the queue.
The Divide, tonight at 9 on Knowledge.
This is not how capitalism works. This is how capitalism goes hopelessly, disastrously wrong.
Water falls from the sky, therefore it should be free. Whenever I hear that, I always say, diamonds occur in nature and they're not free.
Is water the new oil?
It's a financial product, like any other financial product.
The market is changing a bit over the last couple of weeks.
What about the guy that can't afford it? That guy still needs water.
The human right to water means that it's not a charity, it's an issue of justice.
Lords of Water, tonight at 9 on Knowledge.
This is the issue of our time. This is the crisis of our time.
We are here today to announce the filing of criminal charges against HSBC Bank for its systemic failure to guard against the corruption of our financial system.
Are the world's top financial institutions safe havens for crime?
Drug cartels were literally walking into bank branches with millions of dollars, putting it through the teller window.
Yes, there is a lot of drug money. It was just part of banking.
Investigate the shady dealings threatening the world's balance of power.
That scale of operation and secrecy.
It's a recipe for potential disaster.
Banksters, tonight at 9 on Knowledge.
If you don't prosecute these people, who the hell are you going to prosecute?
Those who know don't talk about these things.
Take an in-depth look into the secret world of tax havens.
Many politicians have an illusion that they actually run their country, when actually they run their country within the confines that the global financial system places on them.
At some point, more inequality is not simply more inequality. People are being expelled from livelihoods.
What are the disastrous consequences and possible solutions?
If we were to institute a tiny financial transaction tax, just bring in tremendous amounts of revenue and solve some of these budget crises.
We pay all the tax you require us to pay last year.
We're not accusing you of being illegal, we're accusing you of being immoral.
The price we pay, tonight at 9 on Knowledge.
It's not normal to want to hoard all that money. It's more than you could use in a lifetime, and the people in this country need it.
All right, we're back. that was made up of many, many documentaries all around that same issue. That's what we often do. We'll take one subject and we'll explore it from many different angles to bring these documentaries from all around the world to knowledge at the same time. Usually takes us between 18 months and 2 years to assemble them all at the right time. But we constantly work on this subject to give people a sense of what they're doing and to compile, to curate the information that they would be hard pressed to find or curate themselves. This has been quite a year of pandemic. And I think one thing that it's done that I've seen it do here in British Columbia is it's heightened the recognition of the value of knowledge as an essential service. In fact, we were declared an essential service when the Premier of British Columbia on March 18th of last year declared a state of emergency. And it's been a crazy year for us, because in some ways, pandemics are pretty good for television viewing and streaming. One of the decisions that we made on that very day is I brought in my head programmer, Lawrence Tapley, and said, look, there seems to be COVID programming like absolutely everywhere. Every channel you turn, it's nonstop COVID programming. You go to social media pages, it's the same thing. You've got feeds coming from everywhere and everyone, and it seems to be endless. And I think it's going to continue for some time. So we made a decision right then and there. We said, you know what? People are going to need an oasis from all this. Let's decide now that we will in the next year have, or until as long as this thing lasts, have no COVID programming on our schedule. At some point in time, we'll look at long form documentaries on pandemics and the like. But in this period now, people are going to want a break every day. And we didn't know just how right we would be with that. It's been an incredible year of success for us. We've had record-breaking TV ratings. Our audience share, that is the number of people that view our channel versus other channels, has never been greater. We've been ahead of the CBC, which is has a lot more funding than we do. We've been ahead of them for 10 of the past 12 months. And some weeks we're ahead of Global and CTV, and those networks have huge amounts of money. But I think people were desperate for an oasis, as well as for programming that's different, of a different pace. So we've had record-breaking audiences and record-breaking streaming videos. We stream about 250,000 videos a week. And our donors, what can I say about our donors? We've had record-breaking number of new donors and record-breaking number of donations. We're going to hit an all-time high this year thanks to British Columbians' generosity. Now we're commercial free, and that's a big deal for us, but it's more than a slogan, because it creates a sense of trust in our audience for commonly accepted facts. I think that, and I believe that commercial advertising actually erodes the sense of trust and the relationship that a service has with its audience. People trust us. One has to only look at our national public broadcaster for the contrast. There's CBC television with lots of commercials. There's CBC radio with no commercials. CBC television gets a lot of complaining from the public. People love CBC radio. What's the difference? It's the advertising. It's the sense of trust is not there when there's advertising. Now, one of the things that I'm very proud of here as Knowledge is that we serve the underserved audience. Who's that exactly? It's children from 2 to 8 and their parents or caregivers. That's one segment. But a big part of it, in fact, in prime time, are adults 50 plus. In our culture, there's a complete disrespect for older people. Advertisers certainly don't care about older people. Based on brand theory, they always want those young people. And so most commercial services are aimed at the cohort of the young, people that are still forming their brand allegiances and trying out new things. And so advertisers are very desperate to get to them. When it comes to older people, they just generally don't care, but we care. And I'll give you an example with a program that we had some debate on. You may have heard of it. It's called Heartbeat. It's on Saturdays at 8. It's been a stalwart on. We showed it when it was its original programming. We repeated it all from beginning to end one more time. And when we were coming to the end of it, we thought, my God, what are we going to do? Are we going to repeat it again? And there was a debate between myself and the head programmer. I said, you know, by now, everyone I'm sure has seen Heartbeat. And it's because it's been such a popular program at 8 o'clock. I'm sure everyone that wants to see it sees it. And Lawrence, our head programmer, said, well, you know, it's really, Heartbeat's really more than a program. We should consider running it again because it's become kind of a tradition. So you know, while we were making this debate, we announced that it was ending its run. I never got more mail, more phone calls, more email, desperate pleas from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of viewers saying, please don't cancel Heartbeat. It's a tradition for us. So of course I responded to many people that wrote me directly and said, look, there's no new episodes and we've already repeated it once. We thought you'd like something new. And almost every person to a person wrote back and said, well, we know it's out of production. We know there are new episodes, and we know we've probably seen the 250 shows, but that's not what it is for us. It's a tradition. It's a Saturday tradition. And I came to realize, you know, it's like that comfortable pair of slippers that you have. You put them on when there's no company. You don't wear them when there's company because they may be full of holes, they may be squashed or worn out, but they're a comfortable pair of slippers. And that was a case where Saturday Night at 8 was about providing comfort to an older audience, providing the sense of tradition. So we ran it again. And of course, it's the most popular show on television on Saturday nights, almost week after week after week. And for me, that was a sign of being respectful for the older audience. Now, democracies, like democracy, public broadcasting is not a given. There's always commercial pressure on the politicians to privatize our service so that they can see it as another business opportunity. Or there's pressure from politicians to cut our grants. And around the time I had left Houston Public Television, where I'd been working as an executive producer, I was leaving to go to work for TV Ontario, based in Toronto. It was around that time that the whole wave of privatization globally was happening, and it had finally struck with PBS. And there was a Republican Speaker of the House at the time, Newt Gingrich, who wanted to privatize PBS. Now, one of the reasons that they weren't happy with PBS was that it had controversial views, views that now seem kind of ridiculous, recognizing the human rights of various groups like LGBTQ and the like, and that upset a lot of people because PBS was doing a lot of important programming to highlight the need to recognize a universal human rights of everyone. Well, he was threatening to cut their PBS stations. And what he quickly learned was that the 360 individual stations in that system are all independently owned by the community. And it was the community that funded the largest part of PBS. And so it was the public that saved public broadcasting in the United States. And soon after, we experienced it here. You know, over the 30 years that I've been involved, the almost 30 years I've been involved in public broadcasting, I've witnessed that no matter what stripe of government, left, right, or center, they're kind of government cuts and or government indifference to public broadcasting is probably the norm. And but what's also the norm, what's common to all public broadcasting like ourselves, is that it's the public that supports public broadcasting. And I can tell you that Knowledge Network today owes its existence to public support. Now, the existential threat, of course, comes around every time there's a new technology, but it's not technology that's the threat. It's really public policy missteps. People really love, particularly policymakers, they love technological predictions, and they're constantly misled. People are always enthralled with new technologies. They want to pick winners. And I remember at an industry conference at the Banff Media Conference, World Media Conference. We were witnessing the disruption of the digital economy everywhere in the world, and it was disrupting the film and television business. And everyone was wondering, what do we do? How do we tackle this new competition that's delivered by the internet and the web? And I remember it was a gathering of industry and government leaders. And I remember the head of the film board at the time saying, you know, I think we need a national digital strategy. And they were proposing that the government and the industry get behind BlackBerry's playbook instead of this newfangled Apple iPad. They'd focused on the technology instead of the broader issues of taxation and regulation, because technology itself is not a strategy. Now I'm going to take you back to an earlier technological change. It was a crossroad. It's when the cable and satellite television became very popular and expanded here in Canada. It was the 1990s, still in the full blush of the privatization era in Canada. And it was concurrent with my time in broadcasting. The specialty cable had expanded to at least 200 channels, and governments, provincial governments around the country, were questioning the need to continue to own, operate, or to support public television service in their provinces. There were 4 networks. It was TV Ontario in Ontario, Saskatchewan Communications Network, Access Alberta, and Knowledge Network. And we were all put under privatization review over a span of about 10 or 12 years. Now, 2 of those provincial public broadcasters were lost. They were privatized and sold to telecom-owned operators. And 2 of them lived to fight another day. What was the critical difference? 2 were supported by individual donors and 2 were not. Access Alberta was sold to CTV. SCN, Saskatchewan Communications Network, was sold to Rogers. But TVO and Knowledge Network lived to fight another day with mandates to maintain and improve. It was, and Knowledge at the time had 22,000 donors. TV Ontario had 59,000 donors. So you see the critical difference being individual donors. To this day, that is what saved public broadcasting for Ontarians and for British Columbians. So Knowledge Network emerged at a privatization review with a mandate to maintain and improve in 2007. And this was my time. I came here. We were going to become an independent Crown corporation. And my job was to introduce and take Knowledge Network into the digital era. We established 24/7 nonstop service. And right now we have 10 apps and 10 streaming apps and 2 streaming websites. I like to describe the Knowledge Network programming ethos as this. It's the programming ethos of BBC and the donor funding model of PBS. That's our programming hybrid. We don't refer to programs as content. We refer to them as children's programs or documentaries or dramas. We've had great success since 2007. As I said, we had 22,000 donors. Today we have 42,000 donors. At the time we were raising $1.9 million a year. This year we'll raise over $8 million. And we now have an endowment, the first of its kind for public television in Canada. And that endowment today is worth $15 million and is generating revenue that we use to support new programming, in particular programming from British Columbia filmmakers. And this has made Knowledge Network the most donor-supported public broadcaster in the country. Now, the internet has created a technological change at warp speed and brought on the advent of streaming. And of course, at the beginning, there's always utopian visions that come with new technology. The myth was that media would be democratized, citizens would practice citizen journalism, we'd have self-publishing authors, no intermediaries, which meant no filters, no guardrails, no standards, no moral or ethical frameworks for the information that is out there. It's now a free-for-all. And I remember meeting the Minister of Canadian Heritage around the time, and he had just was gifted or given or bought an iPod. It was brand new. And as I was trying to get his attention away from his iPod, he told me nobody watches television anymore. You know, we'll be, anybody watching a television will be looking at a second screen on their iPad. They'll be sharing information. They'll be looking up the recipes of what people are eating or ordering the clothes that people are seeing on television. Nobody's just going to sit down and watch a television show. And he made a very fateful decision. Through legislation, they required all producers that were going to seek funding from the Canada Media Fund. This is a $350 million fund to support Canadian programming, that all new programs, you couldn't just make a documentary or a drama. You also had to create a website or a game or some other kind of digital doodad. And that's when the Canadian Television Fund became the Canada Media Fund. And this led us into a 10-year-long blind alley. Meanwhile, a new direct-to-consumer service started to take off. It was called Netflix, and Netflix was going from being a DVD by mail order to going online, thanks to the advent of streaming. CRTC, the regulator at the time, decided, because it was a new business, to exempt it from any obligation. No taxes, no regulations, no Canadian content obligations. Netflix, for people that were noticing, didn't have extras. There was no commenting, no sharing, no user-generated revenue. It was just TV shows and movies. And while the public policy sent filmmakers down this long blind alley of creating all these digital extras, trying to compete with YouTube and Facebook, Netflix put the video store online and started to eat everybody's lunch. Big surprise, it turns out that people still watch television programs, and lots of them. Now, the CRTC's flawed premise was that the consumer is king. And from this policy perspective, there were unintended consequences. One of the complaints that consumers had, particularly, have had it for a long time, but it came to a peak around 2014, 2015. Consumers were complaining of their monthly cable fees. They were too high and they're paying too much for channels that they weren't watching. And so the CRTC launched in 2015 the Let's Talk TV hearings with the idea of introducing cable unbundling. The promise was consumers would get more choice and lower cost. In fact, what happened? This led to the few telcos, Rogers, Shaw, Bell, and TELUS to take control, actually not TELUS, but the Quebec-based Videotron, to take control of 85% of all the television channels in Canada. And it squeezed out the independent broadcasting services, and it created higher prices. So you could either, and much less consumer choice. So you can either pay very little and get almost nothing, or you have to take everything and pay a lot. The CRTC at this time, recognizing that Netflix had become big and powerful, and that more and more viewers were going to video on demand, decided to request their appearance at these Let's Talk TV hearings. But by then, Netflix was big enough that they just refused. They just refused to participate. And they had lots of ammunition because the previous government under Stephen Harper had reinforced the populist notion of no Netflix tax. And which is an odd position in Canada, considering that we tax everything in this country. And when there was a change of government, the first government of Prime Minister Trudeau, he reinforced the concept of no Netflix tax. So very odd. Everything in this country is taxed. Somehow Netflix, Disney Plus, they get a free ride. Well, in the last few years, it's become evident that without bringing in the streamers into the regulatory environment, that our broadcasting ecosystem as we know it would collapse. So this is a case where the entire industry in Canada was united, calling on the government to level the playing field between broadcasters and streamers. And the thinking was either tax and regulate everyone or don't tax and regulate anyone, which is untenable. Finally, in the second Trudeau government, the evidence is out there. Streamers like Disney Plus and Netflix are broadcasters by other means. They're very powerful. And there is now federal legislation making its way through the House of Commons called Bill C-10. And it is going to, or it's supposed to empower the CRTC to remake the Broadcasting Act to bring streamers into the broadcasting regime along with the attendant tax and regulation. It's 2 years late, but better late than never. So, public policy, very, very important. And but it should be more than about telling our own stories. It's also about ownership. Intellectual property ownership is central to controlling really what gets made, and it helps build our own industrial capacity here in Canada. Public policy, particularly with this new CRTC remaking of the Broadcasting Act, needs to ensure the sustainability of public space and public service broadcasters. Now, all services connect to consumers by traversing public rights of way. And so the public should benefit from the use of this public space. And it should always ensure that there's a place, a freely available commercial-free space for public broadcasting, because public broadcasting is about serving citizens of a democratic society, not selling to consumers, because selling commercials are an insidious product. And let me quote again from Neil Postman from Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Show Business. It was not until the 1950s that the television commercial made linguistic discourse obsolete as the basis for product decisions. By substituting images for claims, the pictorial commercial made emotional appeal, not tests of truth, the basis of consumer decisions. The television commercial is not at all about the character of the products to be consumed. It is about the character of the consumer of the products. What the advertiser needs to know is not what is right about the product, but what is wrong about the buyer. And so the balance of business expenditures shifts from product research to market research. The television commercial has oriented business away from making products of value and towards making consumers feel valuable. That's the insidious role of commercials and the way that we're manipulated. Now, Knowledge is British Columbia's public broadcaster. This year is our 40th anniversary. We started in 1981, very modestly. We continue to program programs of local, regional, and international independent and diverse perspectives on subjects of relevance and interest to all British Columbians. British Columbians are very worldly people with a great worldview and are quite interested in all parts of the world. And we try to bring that every week to Knowledge Network. You know, we do programs that aren't often the most popular because sometimes they're ahead of their time. So for instance, climate change. We've been doing climate change documentaries for over 3 decades. I think they initially were called environmental pollution, but we actually have climate change identified as early as 3 decades ago, long before it was a widely accepted fact. But I think it helped start to popularize the idea, along with a lot of other people, that we were polluting our planet. Recently, you may have seen a 5-part documentary series called Search and Rescue North Shore. It was launched, a very action-packed kind of series that takes place here in the North Shore Mountains. But the reason we commissioned it was we wanted to promote the sense of volunteerism, because everyone on North Shore Search and Rescue is a volunteer, risking their lives to help others purely out of goodwill. Haida Modern was a recent commission as well. It was about profiling artists, Indigenous artists, and telling Indigenous stories and helping along with the concept of reconciliation. We're in the process right now of launching 150 BC stories that shape British Columbians. Wide range. We're launching 10 new shorts every month. We started in January and we'll launch the last set in August. And it reflects the wide diversity of British Columbia's peoples and its places and accomplishments. And coming this fall, something I'd really like you to mark on your calendar is British Columbia, An Untold History. It's an epic 4-part documentary series about the forces and players that came together to create this political entity we know as British Columbia and joined Canada, the Canadian Confederation, 150 years ago. And it includes stories from the Fraser Canyon War to the founding of Greenpeace, stories that are both familiar and unfamiliar, but mostly from underrepresented voices that you've not heard before, telling stories, familiar ones, but from a completely new perspective. And it's launching this fall, hopefully, with in-person events that we'll be holding across the province. So I hope you'll be able to tune in for that. Now, I'm going to wrap up with the fact that the more things change, the more they remain the same. We're watching more television than ever before. Streaming just means that we're watching it anytime that we choose and everywhere we choose. And that's why we have so many streaming apps and websites ourselves. The social and economic inequality is worsening by the day. The digital divide exacerbates this inequality by creating two classes of people, those that have digital services and those that don't. And commercial services are for people that have money. They must be paid for by subscription fees, advertising, or the tracking of your personal data. Now, Knowledge Network is like no other commercial broadcaster or streaming service. We occupy an essential place in the electronic environment solely for the benefit of the public. We believe our service enhances and supports our democratic way of life. We're freely available service to ensure the quality information is available to all British Columbians. We're commercial free to ensure our editorial independence and to reinforce the sense of trust. And we're able to do that because we're donor supported. And donor support not only helps fund our operations, but it mitigates the effect of government cuts or government indifference. And it acts as a counter to the cyclical threats of privatization. It was the public that saved your public broadcaster in the past, and not now, but maybe sometime in the future, it will be the public that will save it again. Thank you very much, and now I'm open for questions and comments.
Okay, thank you, Rudy. And your mention of the Knowledge Network endowment reminded me that I should let people know that our Compelling Conversations event is sponsored by an endowment that one of our former members made, Winifred Searle. She made an endowment with the Kwantlen Foundation, and that provides funds for us to run this series. And that is very much appreciated. It's 10 to 8 now. I think we will take a break until 7:55. And Rudy, you can take a look at the questions if you like during the break. There's 5 of them there right now. While you're on the break, folks, you can be thinking of other questions you either want to type in there or comments that you wish to make, or if you wish to make your comments live, you can type your name in the chat and I will call on you in order that I see your names. And if you wish to appear on camera while you're speaking, then just say okay on camera and I will promote you to a panelist so that we can see you while you're speaking. So it is now 7:51. We'll come back at 7:56. And Rudy, you can turn off your video and mute yourself if you like. And I will just share a break screen right there. And we'll see everybody in 5 minutes, 7:56. Okay, we're back. So I don't see anybody's name in the chat as wanting to speak. There's one comment. Somebody had to leave, unfortunately, but enjoyed this very much and will send a donation to Knowledge Network as it has been something I've been meaning to do since watching the ambulance show. So good for you. Okay, so the questions are, where's the first one?
Yeah, I had a chance to go through them myself.
Okay, good. I think you answered that one, the first one about whether is BBC public TV and is CBC a mix of public radio with paid TV with paid advertising?
Yes, the answer is yes and yes.
Yes, okay. And
can I actually, just one thing about that question about CBC? I've been asked over the years, you know, the question people love, and thank goodness they're still asking it about the CBC, is, you know, how do you save the CBC? And everybody comes up with all these great schemes. And every time I've presented, whether to, you know, over a beer with a friend or to a legislative committee, I've said one thing, take out the commercials, everything else will follow.
Fair enough. Okay, this question is triggered by the entertained to death reference. What is driving the change on The Voice? I don't know if you know about this, but where originally it was a dynamically different reality show, and now that's the bickering of the coaches having a larger role than the singers' voices. Also, what does this reveal about our future and our devolution, which we are grateful Knowledge Network is fighting?
Well, I have watched The Voice. My wife was a huge fan, so I dutifully sat through it because she sat through some of the hockey games I'd watched. I mean, what you see there is the reduction to bickering is that in a show like that, there are only so many, you know, great singers that can emerge at any given time. And there's less, you know, as they got better and better, the singers, the differentiation wasn't really there. You'd get about 10 contestants. They're all really, really good. And what you discover, you know, on television, and this is on social media as well, that conflict is better, is more dramatically interesting. People will watch conflict, even if they want to slap the people upside the head, they'll still watch it. And it's just that idea that, you know, conflict plays better. You know, it's the same thing on social media, that outrageous, unfounded claims will have a huger viral impact than facts. You know, the scientific fact of climate change is pretty boring. It's just science. You know, it's a lot more fun to have fantastical ideas that it's lasers from space that are doing it. And so it's about that. It's about that the age of show business, that being entertained is more important than being informed.
Okay, and the next question is, it's not a, I've lost it. Oh, the television, the future isn't what it used to be. Is this the right webinar? I think that was written earlier in your talk, and you said more about the future afterwards. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, not really. I think that, you know, well, I'll just say this. I'm an eternal optimist, but I've never been more fearful for, you know, the social conflict that we're in right now. I think in Canada, we're relatively well off because, you know, we take care of people. Universal health care and public education, we spend a lot of money on it. And I think that that's what differentiates us from a lot of other jurisdictions. But, you know, I was a student of the U.S. Constitution and a huge admirer of the American Constitution. And I've never been more fearful for the United States as a failed democracy as I am now.
Okay, here's a technical question for you. When I watch programs like Canada Over the Edge, I find the background music overpowers the narrator's voice. If I turn the volume up to hear the speaker, the music also ramps up. To overcome this, I mute the background sound and watch the show reading the captions at the bottom of the screen. Do you have a way of correcting this? I like the music, but it's just too loud.
I was looking, and I was coming from Mary. Mary, thank you so much for asking that question. That is the #1 question we get, and that I've been getting over the course of my 30 years in public broadcasting. And there's no easy fix. The biggest difference is that producers love, when they're making these shows, love to crank up the music. It's a complaint that we have passed on to every production house, and everybody does. So one of them is just a stylistic issue of just, it's the producers producing it that way because when they're mixing the soundtracks, they mix them in these wonderful recording studios that are incredibly finely tuned. The second issue is a stylistic issue that we've seen in drama over the years, and that is that actors start to whisper to each other as part of, dramatic stylings. The other part is technical. Each television set decodes the sound differently. And we try to optimize the audio tracks here as much as we can, but they all come from the source, from producers. It's the most frustrating thing for us because it's a complaint that we've sent back to producers and to distributors continuously. So I'm sorry, Mary, no easy answers.
I've even noticed it on the National at night when they've got some of their segments, they've added music to them for some very strange reason, and it's highly annoying. Just before I go to the next question, there was a comment in chat that I will answer. Your production brought out many ideas and questions and was somewhat complicated for an 80-year-old, so I would like to watch and listen again and perhaps again try and understand. Absolutely love the presentation, even for me. Will we be able to access this presentation again? Yes, you will. We are recording it, and we will be sending a link to the YouTube video to everyone who registered for tonight's session. So you can expect that in the next couple of days, and we may also post it on the Talk website. We'll see about that. Thank you for the question. Okay, the next was a comment. The future of experiencing any medium will be subscription services.
Well, if private interests get their way, they'll turn every activity into a transactional one. I'm sure there are a lot of people that love to put a gate around Stanley Park and charge admission. But that's the nature of public space. That is the drive towards subscription. Or if it's free, like Facebook and YouTube, then you pay by having your data mined and your activities tracked. You pay for it by the loss of your privacy, and in ways that you can't imagine. So that is that's been the wave of privatization, is to privatize everything in the public space. But we're seeing a pushback now after 3-4 decades of privatization. There's some things that people want to keep public, and I think that Canada's universal healthcare system and our well-funded public education system are a hallmark. And I would hope that in the future we move towards free tuition to universities. It's a logical step forward. But that's why we are free. We spend a lot of money to rent satellite space so that we can get to a lot of the mom and pop distribution centers in British Columbia, no matter where they are, so they can continue to provide our service to everybody, all 5.1 million British Columbians, free.
Okay, have you thought about producing an equivalent program to the PBS NewsHour that I think sets the pace for independent news?
I love PBS NewsHour, having worked at PBS for a few years. I think it's a wonderful service. Its radio equivalent is also wonderful. When I first came to British Columbia 14 years ago, there was thinking that the government at the time would give Knowledge a big grant. But the reality was, by the time I landed in the job, the government was not increasing that. News on the level of PBS NewsHour is a very expensive proposition, would require us to at least double the grant we get from government. So the money wasn't going, and we had to make a decision. Where is the most underserved area in British Columbia? And we decided it would be arts and culture and children's programming. So I would have loved to do it, but I think the CBC's on radio and national television has the ability and the resources to do it. I wish they would just do it better. I wish they would do it like you know, like, what's the PBS radio station called? It's, anyways, like PBS with NewsHour, we should be, our national broadcaster should be producing something on the level of PBS NewsHour. So I wish, but not for knowledge. We're just, it's not a business that, it's a huge part of the business and we're not qualified for it.
So you can send a letter to CBC. Helen says, why did you lump CNN in with Fox?
Okay, well, look, if I was, you know, as the head of public television, you can probably take a guess where my politics lean. So I don't watch Fox except sometimes on YouTube when there's a specific reference to it by one of the talk show hosts. And, you know, both CNN and Fox have part of their operations journalism. It turns out that Fox buries most of their journalism in the afternoon when there's lower viewership. But even CNN has, even though I agree with a lot of the opinion makers there, it is opinion. Their primetime shows are really made up of hosts who spend more of their time expressing their opinion than dealing with hard journalism and asking the hard questions. So while I would probably be closer at home with one, far closer at home with one than the other, they both make more of their money and more of their audience by selling opinion. So that's why I've lumped them in together. Not in terms of their politics, but in terms of the fact that, you know, entertainment, that's what, that opinion is aimed at entertainment. That's where they make most of their money.
Okay, Bridget says, greatly enjoyed Lords of Water program. I think it is over 2 years old. Will there be a follow-up update soon and perhaps a portion of it relating to Canada as we own so much fresh water? Also love the Finding Faith program. Lots of twists and turns that keep me watching. Good choice.
Oh, thanks about Finding Faith. It was a Welsh show produced by the BBC. And we thought it was really interesting. So we're running both seasons and we're waiting for a third season. In terms of Lords of Water, that was a one-of-a-kind documentary from a French producer. It's a multinational production, but it's by this French producer that's done things on sand, the Great Sand Wars. He's done one about global trade via shipping. And so he tends to do one-of-a-kind big documentary. So I don't know if there's a follow-up to Lords of Water, but we are looking at other documentaries from other sources about water as a, you know, this necessity of life being reduced to a commodity that people have to buy. So we are looking at continuing that theme, but we haven't identified anything in particular yet.
Okay, I'm just going to comment on a chat that somebody put in. If you wish your post to be seen by everyone, I'm going to say, put your comments in the Q&A rather than the chat. We save chat for conversations with the panelists on technical issues, etc. So if you have a public comment, please put it on the Q&A box rather than the chat. And then someone else there might have been answering the question, but it says KCTS. I'm not sure if that was that the radio reference or something like that. I'm not sure.
KCTS is the public television station in Seattle.
Okay.
And I don't know why I've drawn a blank on the radio service, but it was.
Go ahead.
It was twinned with PBS at one point. Now they've gone totally independent, thanks to a what's it called, public radio. Oh my goodness.
It'll come, or someone will type it
Yeah,
in.
and I hope they do, but it's public radio in the United States.
NPR. NPR?
NPR, thank you, National Public Radio. And they were very dependent on grants and donor funding. And about a decade ago, the widow of Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's restaurants, left them hundreds of millions of dollars as an endowment. And they uprooted from the East Coast and settled in the West Coast. And now they operate on that endowment. And it's an example of how endowments can ensure independent radio for the future. And that's why, our endowment fund here is so important, because it should, in the years to come, I hope that it'll get to the point that it will ensure that irrespective of government indifference or government cuts, it will continue to thrive.
Okay, the next comment, I'm not sure will mean anything to you. It doesn't to me. It says in North America, ? I think it was in response to something you said, but I don't know what it was. No?
I don't know, but.
If the person still has a question, they can type it again in Q&A with a little more detail.
Yeah,
that was an anonymous one. Okay, what is the streaming app for the Fire Stick TV for Knowledge Network?
Okay, we were just having a presentation on the Android TV app that we just launched a couple of weeks ago. The Fire Stick app is one on our, wherever it's coming up. It's the next, we have one more Android TV app to launch, and then we're going to get to the Fire Stick. We're a very small operation, and so we do things, but we have to do them sequentially. And we went from the most popular apps like the Apple app and the Android app and the Samsung and Roku, and now we're working our way down. Fire Stick is coming up.
Okay, when are we going to see Doc Martin again?
Alas, it's not on our schedule. We felt that one was so ever present on KCTS. It was one of those shows that we decided to take a pass on. So I'm sorry.
Okay, that one's done. That one's done. Okay, how can we change the wording, the government's money, to the taxpayers' money when they speak of government spending? I hope I'm not off topic. If so, please ignore.
Yeah, I don't know, but I do make I can tell you that we make a great distinction here about our donor-supported funding. That the fact that, at one point in time when I got here, the government grant covered 85% of our operations, and now it covers 45%. And meanwhile, we've doubled our revenues, and that's because of the generosity of British Columbians, and also we get supported from Canadians across Canada that get us through our streaming apps and on the satellite. So, no, I can't help you there with the government. They all, but I can tell you one thing, that when the governments in power all do kind of this, they do some advertising, like of how great things are, and if it's a public service announcement, sort of, but if it has a website that you can click to and actually do something, like apply for a grant or get a job, then we will run it as a public, or like a prevent wildfires. We'll run those as public service. But if they're presented as disguised propaganda, we don't. So we're quite careful to keep an arm's length relationship and editorial independence from government.
Okay, what % of your schedule is produced, commissioned versus licensed for broadcast?
Well, that's I'm glad that was brought up. About 5% of our schedule is commissioned from British Columbia filmmakers, but it takes 40% of our programming budget. And 95% of our licensed programs takes less than 50%, sorry, 60%. So we don't commission very much every year because it costs millions of dollars. So to commission, say, a search and rescue episode will cost us $500,000. Won't cost us. We'll have to make up a budget of $500,000 with our money and other money we attract. Whereas I could get an hour of similar programming for $5,000. So we use the popularity of the licensed programming to drive interest in the schedule and donations, and we use the majority, a big chunk of that money to support knowledge British Columbia filmmakers.
Okay. What is Knowledge Network's relationship to the cable companies, Shaw and TELUS? Over the past year, I've had issues accessing knowledge via Shaw Cable, problems with pixelation. I now have to watch knowledge via a Roku stick, but I can't record. Have any others mentioned this problem? Shaw is useless and can't get help from them.
To that questioner, I suggest you call in tomorrow and ask for our helpline. Sometimes what happens is we will, when viewers experiencing problems, will sometimes intervene on that behalf and recognize it might be a problem with that particular carrier in the Shaw system. Shaw has many different systems. We know that we put out a really great signal. We spend a lot of money putting out a quality signal, but we're always tracking down the distributors like Shaw to make sure that it's consistently good. So sometimes we don't know those issues are happening unless somebody lets us know. But there's no reason why, if you're a subscriber to Shaw, you should be getting a crystal clear signal.
Okay.
And further, about our relationship, the cable companies, satellite companies, pay us $0 to carry our signal. But in return, thanks to legislation under the Broadcasting Act, we are mandated to be carried. So whatever system you have, we're available everywhere, but they don't pay us anything.
Okay, someone says, just want to let you know that you were right about Knowledge Network being a reprieve from all the pandemic coverage. I really enjoyed every show I watched. Well done.
Thank you.
North Shore Rescue was a great show. Can you market it to other networks?
Yes, we have the exclusive rights in Canada, both broadcast and streaming, because we paid a lot of money for it. And it was an idea that I had many years ago when I came here and thought we really should highlight the volunteer effort that goes on. And we set up the producers that are a husband and wife team. We set them up with a Canadian-based international distributor. And I think they'll have lots of success selling it around the world and hopefully make money for the producer and help them. We're hoping to do a second season.
Okay. Just a thank you for having programming without interruption, unlike KCTS, with extremely irritating commentary, mostly focusing on gifts for donations.
Thank you. We moved away from those pledge breaks many years ago because the people were getting annoyed by it for a good reason. And also, you can't produce those breaks to the same quality as the programming we're getting from around the world. And what we found was that the most powerful way to convince people to support their public broadcaster was by having testimonials, really well-produced short films that says, hey, your neighbor donates, so maybe you can consider it. You don't have to be rich. $40 gift or $100 gift is just as valuable. And I think creating these short testimonials that show the kind of people that support us really encourages other people to support. And they only last a minute or two, so they're not annoying.
Very good. Okay.
And in terms of interruption, we never ever interrupt a program. We show from beginning to the end, and that's part of what will never change.
That's why you're popular. 60 years ago, Newton Minow gave his TV as a Wasteland speech to the U.S. National Association of Broadcasters. You, Mr. Boutonnall, gave us his view how to avoid that fate. Are we on track to keep avoiding this wasteland? And do you have anything further on that theme?
I think we are. I think having gone through 2 privatizations and seeing that it's the public that saved us, I think we're okay here. It's when the politicians in power eventually get changed and somebody else comes along. But when I arrived at Knowledge Network, the first note I got was from the Minister of Finance at the time, Carol Taylor. And we'd gone through privatization review, and they were in the process of creating legislation to make us the Knowledge Network Corporation Act, make us a standalone Crown Corp. And she said, so that you'll have arm's length relationship and you'll be better to fundraise, could you let your 22,000 donors know that we're doing that? And for me, I said, absolutely, I'll do it right away as soon as I get off this phone call, because it's a recognition that the public, when they speak, is a very powerful voice. And I think the fact that we're continuing to grow our public support shows that we're really an essential service. And I don't think a government would be foolish enough to try to privatize us. We just hope that they don't, we hope that they'll continue to fund us, at least at the pace of inflation, which they haven't been. But no, it's really important. Vast, Newton Minnow's vast wasteland was a real, it really highlighted the importance that it needs eternal vigilance. I think, we're doing a great job, in our very small way. I think the public CBC radio is doing a great job. And I would hope that at some point in time, there's a hallelujah moment about CBC television. Pull those damn ads off the television service. Everything else will follow. We deserve a national public broadcaster. The news, the national, used to be the jewel in the crown of news. But it's, I think someone will come along and make that change. I hope sooner the better, but there is hope there.
And it's the same commercials over and over and over 12 times within an hour session. So where should a person send a suggestion for a show?
Well, you just call into audience relations. You can either go online and you'll see audience relations, or call our line. I'm sorry, I don't have it. I do have it right now. But we get suggestions all the time. And we compile them. Sometimes they're things that we never heard of. And a lot of times they're the things we have heard of and we've considered them, and they're either unavailable or it's not a direction we want to go in. But we do listen to all of them. We do compile them and see what people are interested in. And I know that I remember years ago we brought back Morse. And the reason we brought back Morse was this popular, it was by popular demand. It was the show that everyone kept asking about. So the helpline, or the general line, is 604-431-3200. 604-431-3200, or go online to knowledge.ca and you'll find us, and you can either email us or phone call. And when you call, you'll probably reach Sonia. She's a lovely person. Take your suggestion.
Okay, another vote for North Shore Search as an awesome program. And we finally have someone who wants to talk out loud. Ken, I think you're unmuted now. Go ahead.
Yes, Rudy. It's Ken Jones here. I just wanted to say that you have really built up an advocacy for the Knowledge Network. And you have such great talents to offer to make it into a solid organization. Have you got anybody in your structure or in your organization there that will be able to step into your shoes to carry this onwards in the future?
That's an important question. I hate to think of my own mortality, but it is there. I do have a succession plan that I created a couple of years ago, and I have been in, we have about 3 generations, 3 waves, as I like to call them here, and I've identified some of the future leaders of the organization, of the senior management team, and have a couple of people, a few ideas in the private, in the industry itself, broadcasting industry, for possible successors. But about a couple of years before I step down, I will be recruiting someone in to basically mentor them for the last 18 months to make sure that they carry on. And in the senior management team, I've been mentoring a handful of future leaders here, and really constantly reinforcing the ethos of why we're commercial free. Every once in a while, we have discussions. When we were launching our magazine, it is much more expensive to produce. It's a wonderful piece that actually draws a lot of donations, but it was more expensive. and we had a debate about, well, it's not the program, it's not the service. Why don't we sell advertising in the magazine? And I said, but it's a platform. It's a mass media platform invented by Gutenberg, and but it represents our brand, and everything we should do should be commercial free, whether it's our television service, a magazine, or our website or apps. No commercials, so that when people go there, they know that we're serving only one thing, and that's the public interest. And I always say, sometimes we screw up, but even when we screw up for the right reasons. We thought it was in the public interest. So succession is really important. Mentoring a group of young people here to be future leaders has been an ongoing activity, as well as getting a wave of very young people early on in their careers that will be the wave behind that people. So I hope that when I leave in 2025, that I'll leave behind people that are imbued with the values of public service broadcasting. But thank you for the kind words, Kenneth.
Okay, I'm going to rush through a couple of things here because we only have a couple of minutes left. Felice Bisbee, she may be somebody you know, says info@knowledge.ca is the email address.
Thanks, Felice.
And a couple of thank yous. I'm so grateful for the Knowledge Network, as I love to learn and to have a reprieve from commercialized programs. My mom loved your programming and often donated. I'm saddened to see that now there is more and more subscription plans for many other programs. It is the haves and have nots, and I can't blame people for giving up TV. And another one, keep up the great work. I will continue to turn into the Knowledge Network. It feels more like a community, and you're very correct about trust. Sonia, sorry, we're not going to have time for the question about will TV ever disappear, but there's perhaps a short one here. Why do you have toys in your office, Rudy, instead of a guitar?
We're an alternative broadcaster. I'm always doing the alternative. The first thing when I came here, I said, do we have any plush toys that from some of our old shows? And they pulled out a Blue Bear, I think, or I forget his name, and a dinosaur. And I said, here, I'll put it on my chair. And the reason is that I found at my former network, when anybody comes into my office, puts a smile on everybody's face and lets them know that, hey, we're all children at heart.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you, Rudy. And the last few comments, thanking you for your presentation, were some of the things I was going to say. Knowledge is definitely an essential service, and we're glad that you're at the helm. And we're very grateful that you came tonight to share your background information and thoughts about the future with us. I'd like to thank also Bryn for being in the background here and helping TALK do everything that we do. And I'd like to thank all of you for attending and ask you to tell your friends about both Knowledge Network and TALK. And you can go to our website at kpu.ca/talk. And if you have any written comments for us, any suggestions for talk courses, or perhaps our next compelling conversation speaker, or anything you would like to tell us, please email talk@kpu.ca, and that message will be passed on to me. So thank you again, Rudy, for an excellent evening. I enjoyed our compelling conversation, and good luck with Knowledge Network.
Thank you, and best wishes to everyone for a year full of hope and promise. Cheers.